and this time we're going back in time. Sorry.
To before I was born.
I couldn't help it.
I swear to God, when you came up with this topic, I was like, really?
Yeah, but it seems so. I mean, you were there. You saw Top Gun Maverick, and you had the same experience I did, where you were just like, where is like Doc Brown showing up going, we have to go back, Marty.
Well, you want to do a show about the wacky 80s, and I grew up in the 80s, and they weren't wacky. They were just it was just the time.
But by today's standards.
Oh, that's because by today's standards, everything is so hyperbolic, and it's like, let's look at the past and laugh at it. Not realizing that your time will come. Your children or the children now will grow up and look back at this 2020s and go like,
you know it.
Yes, yeah, before you know it. Everything that you laughed at and dismissed, it'll be your turn.
Okay, but I think that if that were the case, we would laugh, and we do laugh at the 60s and 70s also, but we don't laugh at movies from the 60s and 70s the way we do with movies from the 80s. There is just something that is a little over the top about the fashion and the music.
I want to say this. I know we're going to get on with the episode, but I have to say this. Yes, we can look back at the 80s and we can definitely identify things that came from that time. And yet, somehow, so many movies from the 80s are the ones they keep wanting to reboot.
Yeah, I feel like there's a new rule now of like the amount of time that passes before Hollywood goes, this is the time we go back and we just reboot everything from this decade or do a sequel. Like there's a Beetlejuice sequel coming out. Mel Brooks is making History of the World Part 2.
I always loved the fact that...
Yeah, I know. It's usually like a 15 to 20 year thing when that happens. But the 80s are way past that, and they still keep mining that decade.
Wait a second. I know that, like, technically, math-wise, the 80s are, like, 40 years ago, but does anybody else here still feel like they were it's 20 years ago? Like, when somebody says 20 years ago, you're like, oh, yeah, the 80s.
Oh, no, all the time. When you talk about that feeling
5
old,
years ago.
I was driving in my car, and Jump Around came on, and I was bouncing and singing with it. And I
still drive in my car and bounce when Jump Around comes on.
Of course you do. And it's played at every wedding.
Playlist,
and I'm getting into it.
And
I look at my Sirius radio and it tells me the year it came out. And I was like, that was 20 years ago.
Dude,
how is this song 20 years old?
I was literally having a discussion with my wife in the car about this subject. And I was like, she's like, I don't know if there's that. And then Insane in the Membrane came on the radio. We're both like, oh,
yeah.
I just started a new D&D campaign with friends, and they titled our text group Campaign in the Membrane. And I was like, I'm so excited to be playing with adults.
That's awesome.
It's so good.
I mean, there certainly have been, like, I would say the boot point is Stranger Things, where it's just like everybody's thinking about the 80s. It made so much money for Netflix. It's been so successful on so many different levels, and it has been really, really good as a series. So I think that guy kind of got everybody going, well, I guess 80s is the thing again, right? Now.
You know, from like, I will say that there's something that I've noticed is that also like as, you know, as generations get older, and also like we have more people that are having more conversations about queer identity and what is feminine and what is masculine. You know, the 80s was really the first time in history where we saw a lot of those lines in fashion and sound and music and trends being really blurred.
No, absolutely.
It's a very androgynous decade, and I think that also has a lot to do
It was one of those things where in the 70s you had songs, like you had Lou Reed's A Walk on the Wild Side, which is about somebody who's trans.
The Kinks, Lola.
And David Bowie did several songs.
Yes. David Bowie really the king of that.
And so many. And I was like, man, what happened to those? And it was a really good friend of mine who said, like, well, Boy George happened.
Yeah.
So it became, you know, out in the open mainstream.
Even though like all the 80s right-wing Republican Reaganites still went when they heard that. It's like, I'm just not seeing the trans thing. I'm just not seeing it. I just like Boy George's songs. And somehow they just skip past that.
It was because always it was the androgynous 80s.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact,
I mean, even the hair metal bands looked
absolutely,
and talked about having sex with women while dressed as women.
Oh, it was that whole thing where macho went so far that it started to be queer. Yeah. Like you had Freddie Mercury, who seemed so, you know, masculine with the big cop mustache. Where I went to school and with the Village People, there were girls who thought they were all hot, especially the Indian. Native American. It wasn't until they did their movie Can't Stop the Music they were like, oh.
I too like fat bottom girls, but
honestly, my high school performing visual arts, there came a turning point where being gay was popular, where there were straight guys who pretended to be gay because it was such a popular thing to do. I know, it's blowing your mind, right? You never knew that was a thing.
No, there was a thing.
I mean, yeah, I do, but that's just like so upsetting when you consider the time and space of like post-AIDS crisis and just like there's so. But I do.
AIDS was not a thing at the time.
I definitely see and appreciate the evolution of like David Bowie and and these rock stars who basically walked so the 80s could sashay.
Yes. Oh, that's a great way to put it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. In fact, there's a David Bowie biopic coming out finally, Moon Age Daydream.
I'm so looking forward to that.
Trailers for it now, taking place smack dab at the end of the 70s, early 80s, like doing that sort of spaceman.
I feel like I got burned by the Freddie Mercury movie.
Well, because that wasn't a documentary.
I can't trust again.
I know. That was a biopic.
I think this is Neon, so I'm just saying.
I'm just saying. My trust in biopics is a little.
Yeah, no, I know.
But
I burn them all.
All this being said, we could talk about the 80s and the effect of the 80s forever. Our immature reaction to this, or I should say mine, is what if we do like Top Gun Maverick and we just talk about movies in the 80s that never had a sequel? And you guys might bust me on this if there were like direct-to-video sequels or something for things. But we talk about what we wish those sequels had been. Or not been, if they could do them now. Because
Top Gun Maverick is so much better than it had any right to be.
Just like the original.
It fixes everything about the original Top Gun.
You know, what's funny is that Jennifer Connelly character's love interest is in fact mentioned in passing in the original. I didn't realize this.
Oh.
One of our guys on our review had just seen it and went like, no, they said, I heard you slept with the Admiral's daughter.
Oh, that's right, they did, yeah.
She's Penny. That's mentioned.
Oh, wow. Okay. That was percolating in the back of my mind, but it didn't quite connect.
Yep.
All right, cool.
Anyway, so I was like, all right, so why don't we do a challenge thing where we go like, well, we have to look through the list of movies that never got a sequel in the 80s and go, if you were to do it now, what would that be? So I challenged my friends here, Danny from Belle of Lost Souls.
Hello.
And Martin Thomas from
Double Toasted. Hey.
Who's wearing my favorite shirt he's ever worn right now. Although I'd get the yellow version because I'm more of a Data guy.
It's brand new.
To do this. And Martin, why don't you get us started?
All right. Well, I feel like I should start with probably the most 80s movie of all time, which is The Lost Boys.
Which technically does have a sequel, but I don't count them because they were direct to DVD.
I know. And I thought about that. I've never seen it, but I would never do a sequel focusing on the Frog Brothers because they were just...
That was their mistake with the sequel.
Yes.
Sequels.
Sequels? There's more than one?
At least two.
Oh, good Lord.
Yeah. Yeah, direct to DVD, no one's seen them, so they might as well not exist. I guess.
So a trend with a lot of sequels that come way after the fact is to go like, oh, these characters all hit the skids. And I wouldn't want to do that. I would want everyone to live normal lives, but to suddenly discover that there's been a vampire community slowly growing in some town that they need to kind of get on and take care of. Now, a problem with doing this sequel is that, of course, Corey Haim is dead.
Yeah. All the main vampires die in the movie.
Yes. Yeah. Keith Sutherland, did he die?
I would say he died. Yeah.
Yeah.
But
but in movies.
I mean, you watch the Hammer movies. It's just like, here's a drop of blood and the corpse of this vampire, and they come back. So.
Exactly. So I'm thinking that there'd be a community of vampires kind of slowly taking over a town or even becoming politicians.
You have to have the rock star aspect, though. Oh, how does that come into?
Oh, yeah. No,
we get the guy playing sax.
We gotta find somebody to replace Sexy Sax Man.
Yes,
because he's the main draw.
I don't think you need to replace him. I think he's still doing.
Guy?
Yeah, he's still doing con circuits and stuff.
I wasn't sure if he died or not.
No, he's still around.
This is a guy who had the one thing. And he still promotes himself based on that one.
No, but he didn't have the one thing, though. He toured with Tina Turner forever, and nobody knows him from that.
He was Tina Turner's sax guy before he even was in that movie.
And he was only in that movie. It was just a bit silly thing that he was just like, okay, I'm going to show up and do this thing.
Weirdly
and then
so
became
iconic.
like crazy famous for it.
He's very...
And I would just love if they brought him on and even like made a meta joke about that.
Yes.
Like, well, Tina Turner was going to be here tonight, but
he's very sexy.
Yes. He's very sexy. And a big thing I would do, because throughout that movie, they keep promoting the fact that Jason Patrick, look how much he looks like Jim Morrison. He could be the new Jim Morrison. Well, my thing would be that he's been touring the country in a Doors cover band.
Yeah, or maybe he famously it got really famous and then he faked his own death.
Oh, that's even better.
This movie is going off the rails real quick.
I mean, there's only so much you can do because you know you're going to get Corey Feldman, but he's going to be a problem on the set.
Yeah.
But you're gonna work him as best as you can.
Yeah, no, I would watch that movie as long as, like I said, it doesn't focus on the Frog Brothers being the main part of it.
Not at all, not at all. I mean, Corey Feldman would come in as he'd be an expert on things.
And it'd be like the guy you call in the third act who shows up to train the new generation of like young guys trying to take out
he might even show up with his squad of vampire hunters.
Yeah, like it turns out like he like now works for like a Black Ops.
He owns the comic book shop. I honestly like him owning the comic book shop.
Is Black Ops?
Totally tracks. It's his cover.
Yeah, fair enough. Danny, what about you?
Okay, so I am going to go with The Witches of Eastwick.
Okay.
Love that movie.
Which I absolutely love. And y'all know how I feel about Miss Cher. But I do think that bringing the moms back and bringing in a new generation, like, I know that Michelle Pfeiffer's character has kids anyway.
Okay.
Before all of this, she's a single mother.
Mm-hmm.
And then they all like kind of do their thing with Jack Nicholson and then banish him. And I love the idea of like this next generation of their children who don't necessarily know who their dad is. And then Jack Nicholson sort of comes back on the scene and is like, these are my kids and I'm going to be in their lives now. And so it's sort of like the moms coming in and having to teach their younger generation of kids how to, which I would say would probably be about my age.
And they're rebellious against their moms.
I would say, they're in their 30s now. So like you've got, some of them maybe even have their own young kids. And it's sort of this, well, we need to have a conversation about like who your dad is. And we need to sort of rehash that wild period of our lives where we had this like polygamist love shack thing going on. And then of course
the greatest 80s Republican Party nightmare.
And you've got like 2 or 3 of the kids are like, oh my God, I'm horrified. And then you've got like Cher's kid friends to be like, good for you, Mom. Like, good snaps. But there's, the other thing, one of the things that I love about the new Craft movie that they did was, when you talk about witchcraft, we automatically associate these witchcraft stories, especially from like the 80s and 90s, with this divine feminine energy. But there's a lot of unspoken queer energy that mixes up with that and has historically. And so kind of seeing the Craft legacy embrace that and sort of bring it into the world of the Craft. I would love to see that done with the Witches of Eastwick. And there's so much about like the way that we, the different ways that like my generation views relationships and monogamy, and sex, that I think there would just be like so many fun jokes between generations if there was a continued today in this
kind of
day.
A gold mine there.
Yeah, in a Witches of Eastwick movie. I think it could definitely be a thing.
I will say, Nicholson is done. He's like said, I'm no longer acting. So I'm like, there's no reason you can't recast a different actor because he's the devil.
Christian Slater.
Timothy Olyphant.
Timothy Olyphant is the guy you plug into everything.
But nonetheless,
you can plug Timothy Olyphant into me.
Can't you see it? Can't you see it? As him as the devil with like totally different take on things. And he's like, they're like, you're so different than before. It's like, hey, times have changed.
There are definitely so many actors who could step into that Jack Nicholson-esque role.
I especially see the Timothy Olyphant from The Girl Next Door.
Oh, God. Is the juice worth the squeeze?
Yes.
Yes. Oh, God.
Peterson, get your black ass over here.
I always go back to him in Go, where he, like, arguably in Go, he's a bad guy, and yet, like, even as a heterosexual man, I was like,
Like obviously like Nicholson is the devil. Like there's no reason why the devil would have the same face after generation after generation after generation. Like that is totally something you could feasibly recast. As long as you bring back Cher, Susan Sarandon, and Michelle Pfeiffer, like that.
You could do a fun CG,
that's what you need.
CG bit where like they're defeating him with whatever, and he's like CG fusing with Jack Nicholson's face and stuff. And
you've got like some back and forth.
And,
I'm sure Jack Nicholson wouldn't be mad about making a little extra money about his CGI face being used for a couple.
He can afford more giant heroes to eat on his boat.
Yeah. Boom.
All right, Chris Cox. What's your answer?
Like. My generic answer has been Buckaroo Banzai. I'm not going to go with that. They literally just published a sequel book to it recently, so I'm like, okay. And that one's too, like, they've been, the end of it says, coming soon, Buckaroo Banzai gets the World Crime League. So I'm like, okay. I've talked about this at length. Mine is Big Trouble in Little China, because this has changed over time with the possibility of this actually happening, because the lead has said,
Kurt Russell
has said that if they gave me the right script, I would be interested in returning to it. And recently there was talk, like a few years ago, about The Rock, who wanted to first it was a reboot, and he was like, no, we're not doing a reboot, it'll be a straight sequel. I won't be his character, we'll get him in it. And then it just kind of died. Here's what I like. First off, obviously it's not called Big Trouble in Little China 2. It's called Big Trouble in Little Fill in the City. I like Korea, or Seoul. Big Trouble in Little Seoul. You're like, okay, because Korean films are really huge right now. So there's so many things you could kind of take from that. And
there's such a well of talent that you could pull in for directing, for so many set design.
Great actors you could pull into
Absolutely.
this from that. Sure. And you have him have a son, which is played by his actual real life son.
Wyatt.
Who, when you put a beard on him, looks exactly like young Kurt Russell, just more blonde.
Yeah.
And so you have it where they're already kind of a team, but he's just like him. He's got that whole, like, his ego bigger than, like, what results actually warrant here. They're truckers, they do their thing, but they've been in some adventures. Like, if you watch the original Big Trouble in Little China, even though Kurt Russell is the lead character, he is not. It's the only example I can think of where definitely the lead character, as far as the film concerned, with the most lines, the most camera time, is actually the sidekick to the supposed sidekick, who's the one doing all the work, his Asian friend.
Yeah.
So you have that happen, except you have it where you do bring The Rock in, sorry, Rock haters, where it turns out he had a son he didn't know about, who actually is the super competent son. And both of them are like suddenly in this position of like feeling kind of secondary to them, but having to like pump up their egos even more to get past it, to recreate that same energy there. Okay. And I like that as a possibility for doing that.
I am not a Rock hater.
I'm not a Rock hater either.
I'm not either. I like him, but I don't think he needs to be in everything.
I can live another 10 years without seeing him in
I'm saying, don't introduce him till the third act. Don't even bring him in until the third act. So you get enough time for that. Okay, he's still not for this. Okay, The Rock doesn't need to be in it. Forget what I said. Martin, what's your next choice?
So a not often talked about gem from the 80s that I love was Real Genius, which starred Val Kilmer. It was about a school of super geniuses. I think it was.
Oh wait, is this going to be about Elon Musk?
No. Oh, good Lord, no. Oh wait, is it?
That's what I was like, not literally, but oh shit, I hope no one takes it that way.
No, because Val Kilmer's character was Chris Knight, who was the smartest kid at the smartest college in the world, but he was also a slacker and a smartass. I would say I would draw, if I was drawing a graph of these characters, I would go Chevy Chase in Caddyshack to Chris Knight, to Ryan Reynolds and everything else.
Oh, well, agreed. Ryan Reynolds is definitely that plus that equals that.
Yeah. He nailed that in Van Wilder, and it was all downhill from
all from
or
there.
Uphill, depending on how you look at it.
Uphill.
I meant in terms of gaining traction.
But if you haven't seen the movie, I would highly suggest it. It is a school of super geniuses, young kids, and we have the youngest kid who's actually like skipped several grades, who goes to school, and he's having trouble fitting in because he's so young. Yeah, there's even a scene where he's calling his mom to like, I don't fit in here and I want to go home. And they record it and they play it for everybody there. But it's one where it turns out the government is using them to create some kind of doomsday device, and the kids foil it. It's a brilliant movie, and Val Kilmer is brilliant in it. Now, I know we can't get Val Kilmer back for these kind of things.
I mean, you get him to an appearance, but that's about it.
But I would really focus on his character.
Yeah.
So I guess Ryan Reynolds could step in. He'd have to be the most.
I mean,
obvious
ultimately, it's a college party movie, except that there's just nerds.
Yes,
right? It's
yes.
just entirely nerds. And I like the idea of that because I've thought about this before as well. What if it turned into a sort of like the nerds who are actually thoughtful and think about the right way to do things versus the incel nerds? And you go like, oh, the bad guys are the incel nerds who are trying to be like the guys who are big fans of Elon Musk and what have you. And you just have this sort of challenge of technology and intelligence versus them.
I did not think of it that way. I thought of Chris Knight as being someone who the establishment hates because he is an iconoclast, but he's super smart. And I go like, oh, so a lot like Rick Sanchez. I saw him as like a Rick Sanchez from Rick and Morty type of character that everyone in the establishment of the government hates and wants to get rid of because he's building something. He's pulling all his graduates from his class together. And they might even get the kid, I wish I was going to remember his name, who's the main, sort of the main character from the old series.
Had a brief run as an actor.
A brief run as
was
an
in
actor.
a few things. Yeah.
It's someone who they would enlist to like, you got to go, look, he likes you. You can go shut him down. And it'd be kind of a silent flute thing where he's there to go shut him down only to realize like, oh, this is a think tank that's actually about to pull off something that's going to make the world better. Even though everyone's afraid of them, and they pull it off.
I could see that. I would watch that.
Yeah, right?
Danny?
Okay, I'm gonna pull one out of left field. This is not what I discussed with you guys earlier. But this would be such a good sequel. It would be such a good sequel. Adventures in Babysitting.
Okay.
I love that movie.
Yeah.
Much.
There's so much about it that holds up. Like there's nothing from the 80s.
It gave us our first iteration of Thor.
Yeah.
I know. Oh my god.
No, he was on the Hulk show at one point.
Was that before or because I kept feeling like it was after?
It might have been after.
I'm not sure.
Oh god, but it's just like first of all, like it's great. It's great, Vincent D'Onofrio.
Yeah,
it's just so great. But also, like, there's so many things about that movie
He
that
could play Fat Thor now.
He's already the kingpin, sir.
I mean, so there's so many things about that movie that I really loved and enjoyed.
Oh yeah.
And just a babysitter hijinks movie in general is a great idea.
It is.
And especially like in this day and age of like, what would it take at this point to like, it still holds up, right? Like you would still like, there's no delivery service that would allow you to not have to go pick up your hysterical friend who is, who is stranded at the bus station.
Okay.
And like, it's like there's just so much about it that really holds up. Doing it in a modern New York City still holds up because again, like the city is a character, even more so than I think it was in that movie. It would just be so good. I love the original for so many reasons, but like a big part of that is like the fact that you had this little girl who's super into Thor. Like she was just so antithetical to what you usually see little girls characterized.
That's true.
Good point.
At that time,
and now so many more people know who Thor is.
I know. There's so many good
Danny,
Thor
you have a good
jokes.
pick because whereas normally I'm like, why are you doing a sequel to this? Just do something original. That actually is a good idea. Like that has a great idea that can be mined for something new for a new generation.
Absolutely.
Elizabeth
It's like
Shue.
Home Alone. Like the
Yes.
premise never gets old. Apparently neither does Elizabeth Shue.
Yeah. She can be the mom.
She could
who
be.
leaves.
Oh
Yeah,
my god.
yeah.
And can you
Back
imagine
and
like you
forth
don't
out.
even see her till the end of the movie? Like you don't
Oh,
see
yeah.
the parents. She just like comes over, the babysitter comes over.
He's just
and-
trying to explain what happened, and she's like, I get it.
I get it. Yeah. I've been through this before. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's just like a couple. Yeah, she's just at the very end, and she's like, "Honey, I got a story for you. Sit down."
That movie was always like if John Hughes had made Martin Scorsese's After Hours.
Yes. Yes.
And was just like, this is so much fun. It's one of those films that got kind of forgotten about over time, and it's just I would hold it right up there with any of those John Hughes movies.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
It's so good.
And funny.
It's weird to think that he didn't direct that.
Also, like they're just like the scene where they're like in the blues bar and all that stuff. Just,
Yes,
so
has to have needs to have a blues
music
musical
sequence.
number.
Yeah.
Like, absolutely. And just like any sort of a comedy of circumstance is always going to hold up, right? Because like it's just one thing happening after the other, and one person having a really bad day, and like that whole situation, like feasibly could have gone down in an era with cell phones. Like,
you're right.
Yeah.
would still work.
Yeah. That was like pre-Giuliani New York, and now we have post-Giuliani New York, which is like a totally different, crazy, bizarre animal that you could like pass through that world of all the weird stuff that would happen to you, you know?
Absolutely. And there's just so many ways it could work. I'm honestly, again, I'm really surprised that didn't get the Home Alone treatment where they're like, we could just keep doing this for as long as we want to do this because the premise never gets old. And I'm not mad about it because obviously, like, don't overdo it, but yeah.
Sure. Yeah.
But yeah, instead of making that last Home Alone movie, they could have been doing.
It's time for another Adventures in Babysitting.
Yes.
I was a babysitter as a kid. Like,
me too.
Shit's real. Shit is real.
Speaking about getting mad at something, you guys don't get mad at me for this one. I have to do it.
I'm already mad.
I went through like so many entries on this. I have ideas for all this, but I'm gonna have to. Oh God, I have to say Xanadu. I'm sorry.
Why?
I really loved Xanadu.
Okay, Chris.
I love Olivia Newton-John.
No, me too.
Okay, so maybe we're the three people in the universe who like Xanadu.
Well, I was like, Olivia Newton-John was like a religion to me when I was a kid.
I can like hear the song in my head right now.
My first crushes.
Because like I loved Gene Kelly already. I'd seen Singing in the Rain as a kid. And I was like, oh my God, it's still one of my favorite movies of all time. And then this movie comes out with ELO, who I was already into, Electric Light Orchestra with us doing the soundtrack. I'm like, oh my God, I love this so much. And I was super into roller skating. Here's the thing, ELO is now actually big again. Roller skating
was coming back.
Big again.
I have roller skates.
Yeah, and like dance movies are big again.
Yes.
So I'm like, there hasn't been a Step Up movie yet that deals with like fantasy and gods and
Zendaya. Cast Zendaya in the Xanadu reboot. She's an amazing dancer.
Are you
Put her on some roll.
No, the closest that came with 3D, which was like a fantasy type thing. And the reason I like that movie so much and say Step Up 3D is the one to see is even though Channing Tatum's not in it. And I love Channing Tatum.
They blew it having Channing Tatum.
That's like a test to see if you're a good person or not. If somebody's like, I don't like Channing Tatum, you're like, cool. So you're like the Antichrist.
The third one is the one that nods towards Xanadu. It nods towards Top Hat. It nods towards Singing in the Rain. I really like this one because it's kind of fantastical, but it never gets into like mythology. Yeah. Like the Xanadu story, just do it again.
Yep.
Like, roller skating's big again, and there's like a guy who's an older dancer. I don't know who you would specifically bring in with that. Maybe Brishkinoff or
my first thought goes to Christopher Walken, just because all I can think of is the weapon of choice video.
Right. You win.
I'm just gonna low key cast this whole thing for you.
Yeah, well, like or Loki, just period.
But Walken is an incredible dancer. Yeah, he totally pull that off.
He dances in almost every movie.
Yes.
Yeah, which is very purposeful. Yeah, I mean, there's so much ELO music that hasn't been used yet in films that would be great. I'm a big fan of the album Time by them, which is very deeply underappreciated. It's one of their best records. Use stuff from
it's like a space opera.
Yeah, it's completely a space opera. Or just, Jeff Lynne's still alive doing music. So is most of the rest of the band.
Yeah, he's pumping up everybody else.
If there's a sequel I'm more excited about, I can't think of what it would be for a modern day sequel than Xanadu. I'm sorry.
I'm just very surprised. Like, I'm not mad at all. I'm just that is not what I expected you to come up with.
It rarely comes up.
If you knew him better.
I know, right?
You know me long enough. These are the things that crawl to the surface every once in a while. Like these things stuff I loved when I was 6.
I appreciate this.
Shut up about it.
Yeah. I had a poster of Olivia Newton-John from Xanadu in my closet when I was a kid, and I used to pray to her at night when I was going to bed. I would just be like, please give my next date, because my parents weren't particularly religious, but that's as close as I came, because she's a fucking Greek goddess in the movie. I'm like, sure, she's Olivia
Newton-John, please make me glamorous.
I just need to learn to do that move in roller skating where I can go backwards real fast without slowing down. I literally made that prayer. Anyway, we got to wrap this up. We do have a bonus video with me and Martin where we're going to do a challenge round where our director, Matt, is going to just pull stuff off a giant list I pulled of 80s movies, and we get like a minute to try and say what the sequel is. I know how much Martin loves improv.
Oh, yeah. I love that.
Is the evil side of me.
Would you like Appa?
I can use Appa for this.
But that's Martin Thomas from Double Toasted. This is Danny Danger from Bell of Lost Souls. I'm Chris Cox from oneofus.net. If you want to see that bonus video, you have to go to oneofus.net and become a subscriber at the $5 a month level or above, where things are going to get crazy. I'm just saying, I'm just only sad Danny can't stick around for this because I think she'd be good at it.
I think she'd nail it.
Although the problem is, like, as you yourself admitted, you'd name a movie and you're like, I've never even heard of it.
I know. The 80s movies that I've seen a million times.
Oh.
And the ones I haven't seen, I'm like, I know.
You've never seen it.
Quick, Legend of Billie Jean 2. What would it be? Say.
Nothing. I got nothing. I got nothing. Although I did bartend for years, and I can tell you that the sequel to Cocktail would be a lot dirtier, grosser, and would smell like high cleaner.
That is one of those sequels where the main character's on the skates.
It would have entirely too much grenadine in it.
Yeah. Don't bring back Cocktail.
Anyway, but they will because it's Tom Cruise property.
Yeah.
I'm more for Risky Business too, where he has to deal with his own kid being bad and hiring a bunch of hookers to be in his house. But that's me. Anyway, we'll be back next week with another video. Thanks for watching.